People love making money quickly. In fact, tell someone that they can make you money fast and you will have their attention before the last word leaves your mouth. It is a flaw in our human emotions that causes our eyes to light up at the thought of making quick, no sweat ball of money. The psychology in itself is a deep, dark rabbit hole for humans, and that is why today we are looking at get-rich-quick schemes that worked until they didn't. Now, maybe some of us MoonBoys thought that get-rich-quick schemes started with 16-year-olds on TikTok flexing their day trading businesses and drop shipping businesses just for an easy way to make money. But you guys wouldn't believe the get-rich-quick schemes have been around for longer than the internet has been around. I mean, get-rich-quick schemes have actually been around for so long that we have to go back to the 1880s to first look at this get-rich-quick scheme. Now, I could not believe when researching for this video that someone actually got away with what I'm about to tell you. Some of these get-rich-quick schemes are so crazy you wouldn't even believe them, but trust me, it is going to be worth watching. But we have to start off with one of the craziest get-rich-quick schemes of all time, which was created by George Parker. Now, I could not believe when researching this video that someone actually got away with what I'm about to tell you. Somehow, George Parker managed to sell a wide range of New York City's landmarks to oblivious tourists. Yes, you heard that right. He was selling monuments and landmarks to everyday people. He ended up selling people the Brooklyn Bridge, Madison Square Garden, and even the Statue of Liberty, and not just once, actually a few times. Yes, he managed to convince people through opening real estate businesses and producing realistic looking documents that he for starters owned the bridge and that it was too stressful for him, so he was looking to offload the burden onto someone else. After selling it, well, then he would just print out the documents off again, run it back to someone else. I wonder how many people were rocking around with papers telling everyone that they ended up buying the Brooklyn Bridge. With no concrete numbers on how much he was selling it for, there have been rumors that he was actually trying to offload the bridge for $50,000 at its peak. Bear in mind, this was around the 1880s, so $50,000 would be equivalent to $1.4 million in today's world. Now, do you reckon he ended up living happily ever after? Well, no. George ended up being caught and was sent to prison. But luckily for George, once a con man, always a con man. He managed to get his hands on a sheriff's hat and a coat and just walked out of the Raymond Street jail where he was kept. You seriously cannot make this stuff up. After escaping and then being captured again, George was then sent to Sing Sing prison for life. Believe it or not, he isn't the only person to somehow pull off selling famous landmarks to everyday people. A man by the name of Victor Lustig disguised himself as a government official going around to all the scrap metal companies trying to sell the Eiffel Tower. And yes, Victor was successful selling the tower in around 1925. Look, in today's times, these money frauds sound beyond believable, but you have to remember during these times, this wasn't considered that wild of an idea. And around this time, it was happening quite often and it gave light to what is referred to today as a Ponzi scheme. For the MoonBoys playing at home, a Ponzi scheme is essentially fraud involving investors being tricked into high returns with basically no risk. Also known as something that sounds too good to be true. And I bet that you didn't know that the actual word Ponzi was created thanks to a man called Charles Ponzi, who was later nicknamed the Pons. We can all thank him for the creation of the phrase the Ponzi scheme, because Charles managed to, in a dumbed down summary, take money from investors, promise them a 50% return in a short period of time. And obviously this never happened. Little did these investors know that Charles was never actually investing their money. He was basically using brand new investors' money to pay off the old investors. It is estimated that he made around $15 million in only 8 months of work. Essentially, he created an infinite money loop until hit the fan. He started being investigated, and this led to investors wanting to pull their money out all at once, and as we know today, that's when the bad turns into ugly. Somehow though, to my disbelief, he only copped 3.5 years in jail. Unfortunately though, for our next Ponzi scheme creator, only 3 years in prison would have been a godsend, because he ended up with 150 years in prison. Yes, he actually got more than a life sentence. This man was known as Bernie Madoff, who I'm sure you guys have already heard about thanks to a recent documentary released on Netflix talking about this massive scheme that he pulled off. It was reported that Bernie Madoff managed to pocket something like $20 billion out of it all, but hey, what's $20 billion when you have to spend 150 years stuck behind bars? The Ponzi scheme that Bernie Madoff ran is one of the most famous Ponzi schemes in the history of the world. It focused a lot on the same principles principles as Charles's Ponzi scheme, but on a much bigger scale. Bernie was even so smart that he managed to trick federal agents in America not only once, but a few times that he was doing a legitimate business, but obviously it all came tumbling to the ground. Sogen Kato, though, was someone that was actually able to collect pensions from the government after he had already died. In fact, Sogen Kato was able to accept $106,000 over the course of 30 years after he had died. In the year 2010, Sogen Kato was thought to be the oldest man alive in Tokyo. Government officials and welfare workers upon the news went to congratulate Sogen, but they were actually denied entry into the family home. The family claimed that he doesn't leave his room anymore and wanted to be left alone, but this actually raised alarms. The police then visited this house later, only to find Sogen was mummified. He was dressed in clothes, in bed, and was dead. Yes, his family had somehow hid his death from the world and were collecting his pension payments for over 30 years. It is actually quite horrific what money can make people do. We can only imagine this being the tip of the iceberg, though, for the amount of people out there right now scamming people of others, and they have not been caught yet. One of the biggest ones lately would have to be FTX, but if you guys want to see a video on that, make sure to let us know in the comments down below. If you've been entertained today, it'd mean the world to the MoonBoy army if you hit the subscribe button and join the woke community as we turn from degens into ballers.